So good afternoon, everyone. I know this is going to be the toughest one for you all to keep awake, last session of the day, but we'll try and make it as interesting and as energizing as possible. I'm not going to formally introduce our panelists because I think you have a profile for everybody in the in the book that you have. I'm just going to give a little overview of what we're trying to kind of address or look at in this particular session. So, as many of you know, in the NGO world, there's been a sudden surge of intermediary services in our country, particularly over the last 5 years. And I was looking at one research report which says that there are well over 100 now operating in India alone. Most intermediary services cater to both the non-profit and for-profit organizations, and most of them also have a two-tier financial model. So there are two main approaches which intermediary services in general seem to have. One is an application-based model where an intermediary chooses which non-profits it will support based on its own internal criteria. So an example of that is really Atma and Mary Ellen's organization, and maybe she can tell you a little bit more about it when she speaks. And the other is a fee-based or a pro bono support model, which works a little bit like a consulting model that are typically open to supporting pretty much any kind of client who needs their kind of expertise. So I think this is a little bit like what we do at CAP, hopefully more, not so much pro bono and more financial. So as far as I could tell, when I looked at the intermediary services that are available now in our country, and please correct me or amplify on this, I thought that they seem to be filling five main, or they work with five main themes, under five key themes. The first being legal and financial, the second being HR, the third being M&E, the fourth being providing technology solutions to the nonprofit sector, and then fifth being sort of overall capacity building expertise that they provide. I may be forgetting some, but these were the five general themes I found running through most of the intermediary services that I kind of looked at before this, for this session. So what we'll try and flesh out today in the session is, what specific role do intermediary services provide to nonprofits? Without them existing, what is missing and why are they sort of existing in a way today? How effectively have they managed their role? And my last question actually is going to be to all our panelists, a little bit looking into the future and what's the kind of role that intermediary services could potentially also play, what perhaps issues that they're not addressing really today. So I'm going to start with my first question to Rukmini, and as Rukmini is from a corporate foundation, has also worked in the Tata Trusts, and can you tell us why did you actually choose to work with an intermediary, and would you do so again? And also, can you tell us of any challenges you faced, Rukmini?
Thank you, Rati, and hello, everybody. I think I have, in my career, worked with intermediaries or worked as representative of intermediaries. Why did I choose to do that? I think is it was something I thought I could contribute there. But just to kind of add to the introduction that you gave, I think one category of intermediaries which needs to be added there is the re-granting intermediaries. And that's a category that we saw a lot in the 90s and early 2000s, where there was large funds coming into the country. There was the large Ford Foundation or DFID funds, and they obviously did not have the capacity to reach out to small organizations. So they brought in an intermediary to manage that as a re-granter. So that is, I think, one critical thing, and which has given rise to intermediaries a lot. Because the resources available, especially with CSR, the resources available for development work will keep increasing without the ability of the people who hold those resources to be able to reach out to organizations which can utilize them. And I mean, therefore, really, intermediaries to stand, I mean, who they're intermediating between? They're between implementing organization and funding organizations. So they are intermediating. And I think there's a really, really critical role to play there, and which is why I would would like to be part of that group of organizations, which is closing this gap between funding organizations and their inability to reach out to all the organizations who they would like to. So just for somebody in between to do that. So, you know, when in the early part of our career, we had the concept of mother NGOs, which were really large implementing organizations which took on the role of being grant makers as well, this additional role. So they would receive a chunk of money from a donor, and then they would give smaller ticket grants to other organizations. And critical as that role is, I think there was also a lot of challenges in that. Probably we'll talk about that later, sure. So I won't touch upon that now. Okay. But that's one category of intermediaries which we had a lot. And of course the other category is, and the one that I lean more towards, is what probably we could call purpose-built intermediaries, which are intermediaries with specific expertise and skill sets who contribute to one or two specific areas of development work. And that's, I think, the one that I'd lean towards. I don't know if I've answered your question.
Yes, you have in a way. I was actually referring more to the second category, right, that actually is more a thematic-based intermediary service. In both the intermediaries that you mentioned, just quickly to ask you and then I'll move on, what were any challenges that you'd like to express to the audience and tell them about?
So challenges, of course there are many challenges, as many as there are opportunities. So you could just flip the challenges and they become the strongest case for intermediaries actually. I think one of the biggest challenges is what is the point of departure if you look at the equation, the relationship between funders and implementing organizations. I suppose we'll all agree that there is a certain trust deficit that exists between funders and implementing organizations. Now what you're doing is you're bringing in another entity in that equation. So there is a risk of intensifying that trust deficit or filling the gap. So like I'm saying, it's like the same argument that we can make for intermediaries is also a challenge. The intermediary really being between the funder and the implementing organization has to represent both. It has to understand both the aspirations, the challenges, the limitations of the funder as well as the implementing organization. And if it leans towards one, which in most cases becomes the funder, it really becomes an agent of the funder then. And that is, I think, a big challenge. Also, I think the value framework of all three entities, funder, intermediary, implementer, have to be aligned. You know, if that value orientation is not aligned, and that happens, I mean, the raison d'etre of the intermediary being set up, if it does not align with the cause for which the implementing organization is working, I think there can be a lot of dissonance over there. I mean, in whose interest is the intermediary working? You know, and I think the third challenge is also identifying the skill expertise. So if you're going to ask an implementing NGO to suddenly become a grant-making organization, they obviously don't know how to do grant-making, you know, and then the funder is expecting the intermediary organization, which is really an implementer, you know. So if it's suppose a women's empowerment program, and we tried this in one of my earlier roles, we tried this, a large NGO which was doing women's empowerment program. So suddenly they've also found that they were becoming an intermediary organization, re-granting to about 30 other organizations. So you have to ensure that you know how to do grant making. You have to ensure you know how to do auditing, monitoring, and also some capability building, some leadership support, some succession planning. It's not in your DNA to do those things. You're really a women's empowerment NGO. So I think those are kind of some of the challenge areas that one would face.
Thank you. Can I turn to Akshat as a more newer social enterprise which you've started, and I understand that you have worked with intermediaries, and here I'm talking about more intermediary services I believe you have worked with. Can you tell us about also some of the challenges you faced and sort of your overall experience working with an intermediary service, please?
Sure. Thanks, Rati. Yeah, I mean, actually, when we started 7 years ago in 2010, In fact, I would say throughout last 7 years, we have been engaging with different intermediaries at different levels. When we started, we ended up actually talking to Give India about our leadership programs, and they ended up, in fact, introducing us to one of the big donors that we work today with. So, and they just introduced and they went away. That's it. So they helped us with the introduction, and I would say that is the biggest value add we have had by one of the intermediaries there. And after that, we've been working with, we were Unlimited India Fellows for consistently 3 years as their level 2 investees and now fellows. So there also, we had a lot of value that we derived. And CAP is someone we have been associated since some time. But in fact, I would say all the 5 points that you brought up where intermediaries come up, they're very visible, impactful points. In fact, where I felt also intermediaries add most value is the invisible part, which is they're actually creating this ecosystem. In fact, in last 10 years, I would say intermediaries, what they have really done, in fact, even if you look at city like Mumbai, they have really created these ecosystems for all of us to come together, learn from each other, share our expertise with each other and connect and also build on each other's ideas. That has been the biggest value add for us as Blue Ribbon Movement, where a lot of Unlimited India partners have worked with each other, and today we run programs also together. So I think that's the biggest value add I feel. Apart from obviously small seed funding that we got from Unlimited India, that helped us a lot. I mean, there are small things. Just last week I was stuck with a budget, and I spoke to Meher, she connected me to Tina, and she really helped us transform the way our budget was proposed. We were trying to propose to one of the corporates. So these are very small areas where intermediaries have really helped us shift our perspectives. As far as challenges are concerned, I would say I agree with, I second Rukmini, where I also sense that at times they, I see intermediaries tilting towards more towards donors compared to beneficiaries. So that alignment at times you can foresee when you're forced down to ask for some report specifically, and then suddenly you have to leave everything and just work on that report or that specific M&E that needs to be submitted. So I think that is one of the challenges. And secondly, I feel at times it helps to have intermediaries being hands-on and have be in touch with ground reality, because then you are actually talking a language where both of you understand what are your real problems. So that is another challenge that I feel.
Thank you. So last but definitely not the least, Mary Ellen, as an intermediary service, you've heard from both Rukmini and Akshat. I'd love to hear your views on what are some of concerns, challenges, as well as some learnings you have had working with the gamut of NGOs over the last few years, and what are some of key kind of takeaways you can leave with our audience here on working with the NGO world as an intermediary?
So for us at Atma, when we work with organizations, we work with them for up to 3 years. So it is not a very transactional relationship where we come in and work on one specific thing and then go out, but it's something where we are able to build off of work that we've done before, build off of a relationship that we have taken the time to build. And I think for me, and in my experiences as an intermediary and working with other intermediaries, I've been part of the DOSRA programs. I think one of the most important things is being able to have that relationship with somebody, especially if it is someone who is you're going to be spending a lot of time with. So making sure that you take the time at the beginning to establish core values that you have that are the same. Making sure that you take the time to understand how each other communicates. What is the roles that different people in your organization play? So when we start out a partnership, we do that by spending a solid 2 or 3 days with that organization and their full team to understand like what is that organization made of and what are all the different components of it. And then that relationship continues and can continue on to 3 years. So I just came from doing a strategy workshop with one of our graduated organizations that graduated 2 years ago, but they wanted me to come back and do something with them today. And they've grown so much in the last years, and it was just an incredible thing to see, and to have seen them grow from, they had like, I think like a 30 square foot office that you had to like climb up a ladder to get into. And today I went and they had this massive office that they're operating out of, and like the leader has his own cabin and his co-founder has his own cabin. I was like, this is an incredible journey that this organization has been on. And office space obviously doesn't mean everything, but it's just a signal of where that organization has come to. And I think a really important part of the relationship that we have with them is being able to see each organization through all of those steps. So that's something that I value a lot about my work, and being able to see that journey. I think in anything, communication is key, and making sure that you're working with intermediaries that have the knowledge and the skills to serve your organization well. And that you really go to them for the things that are relevant to you.
So can I ask you, as this is a conference on compliance, can I ask you how important is it before you choose to work with an NGO that they are compliant, or how compliant need they to be before you choose them to be a partner as well? You mentioned about a value sync and being on the same page on many issues. What about compliance?
So in terms of compliance, and I think some of what I heard Meher saying earlier about the compliance certification, we know when we engage with organizations, we're doing so because not everything is there yet. And so for us, we spend a lot of time trying to understand what's the intention and what is that value system of the organization. And then what we count on that organization is that they are honest and upfront about what they have and what they don't have, and that when we do point out a compliance issue, they take that seriously.
Okay.
So it's not that everything is in place, but that the intention is there to do things properly.
Okay, and just turning tracks a little bit, Rukmini, as a corporate foundation and also having worked with several NGOs, or well, not actually as part of them, but having worked with them as part of data trusts, how do you believe ideally you should choose intermediary services? How do you verify their compliance? How do you verify that they really have the expertise and competence, and they will really be a value add for you as an NGO? How would you suggest that is done?
So CIPLA Foundation, honestly, we're a fairly young organization, and I think my colleagues also here, but we are a small team, and currently we don't feel the need for intermediaries. But yes, in my previous role, we used to use a lot of intermediaries, and I think so. If I look at CIPLA Foundation, when would we really want to identify intermediaries or partner with intermediaries is when I think we feel that we are getting into investing in areas which are really not our expertise, which are so divergent with what we are able to do, with what's in our DNA. I mean, we're a corporate foundation, and we can do a few things, and we have it's in our DNA to do a few things. But for instance, I mean, I think all of us have lost sleep on the word scale up. And I mean, there was one time when we all lost sleep on log frame, then we lost sleep on indicators, and now we're all losing sleep on scale up. And if we feel that our partners should be scaling up, should we build the expertise internally to advise our partners to scale up, or should we bring in an expert intermediary organization which can work with NGOs to scale up. I would do the latter, because it's really, we should not be building, investing in human resource and infra and whatever it takes to build a team to advise NGOs to scale up. We should not do that. We should not create that team. And there are organizations which do scale up advisory services. I mean, we worked with somebody in the past, and they really specialize in that. They know how to kind of read market intelligence and understand the organization's abilities and its aspirations and its limitations, and give that kind of service. So for us to set up that, or another intermediary which works solely on succession planning, and and succession planning, as we all know, is an area that every NGO needs support on. Now, for us to say we'll build a team internally to advise organization on succession planning, I think would not be right. Let somebody else who can do it, let them do it. And then again, what I spoke about earlier is about this whole value orientation. I mean, there are intermediaries, purpose-built intermediaries, who really are, they're for-profit entities, really. And they have a veneer of kind of social interest and, wanting of social change. So I think the relationship would not work, and we would, I hope we can identify them and steer clear. But it is where we feel we are aligned on what the larger objective is, or larger mission is, and where there is specific expertise within the intermediary. I think those are the ones we'd pick up, because we should not invest in developing that internally.
I totally agree with you, wearing my hat as a part of a corporate foundation. But just turning to Akshat, so I think Rukmini well articulated why she would actually use or have an intermediary service. But you, as a newer organization, given a fee that most intermediary services charge, I know that most of us in the NGO world are always looking at our wallets and the size of our wallets and what we should be spending on and what we should not. So would that be an issue of concern, the fee that the intermediary service is charging? And I know you've used intermediaries, so were you prepared for it by building that into your costs, or how did you manage that? And did you feel at the end of the day it was a value add and worth it for you if you did have an admin or a cost element?
Yep. So one is the fee element of intermediaries who charge, and intermediaries who actually give you fund, their actually time comes in. So if I'm not paying any money, I have to actually give in time. So I have to think on both counts, whether my time and money, if I'm getting returns on both counts there. And I feel there have been intermediaries in the past where we have consciously taken a decision that we don't want to engage because it's not going to give us enough return there as well in terms of time, although we are getting money from there. And on the other hand, someone like CAP, they charge a very small amount in a year, and we feel even if it was a little more, it would have helped, because there are few advices or suggestions that we get from CAP. It really adds value to the organization, especially when you are in a startup phase. Although we are in the 7th year of operations, still today, it helps us to have those suggestions, that mentorship, and the relationship, right? I mean, that the fact that there's someone out there who's going to help you, that in itself gives you a lot of peace of mind.
Okay. So, Mary Ellen, I won't pry into figures, but can you talk a little bit as an intermediary service about payment models and what you think about it, and what's what can you say about services that charge a payment, and how does it work really?
So, Atma, so for us as an organization, Atma is mostly philanthropically funded, and we do have a fee model for organizations that we work with. Some of the organizations that we work with are, so when we get to know, as I said before, when we're engaging with an organization, the most important part is the relationship and the alignment that we have with that organization. And then after that, we talk about like what fee structure works for that organization. For us, we have a sliding scale model, so it depends on the budget size of that organization and what we think would be a meaningful investment for them into what we're doing. Obviously, it really depends. Some of our organizations are like under 10 lakhs in terms of a budget. So being able to put in like 2 or 3 lakhs into our services would be like way too high. And so we adjust the fees accordingly to the organization size. That's our approach. I spend a lot of my time on fundraising as a result, so that we are able to do that and to work with the kinds of organizations that we want to. It depends on the intermediary, right? So there are HR intermediaries who do headhunting, for instance, and their fees are very high, but they're targeting a certain type of organization that is that mature and has that budget set aside to do it. On the other side, then anyone who's sort of in the startup and early stage space, I would say, would probably have to have a mixed model.
Okay. So I'll just put my final question to all three panelists is sort of looking into the future. Can intermediaries play a more significant role as a platform to perhaps drive collaboration amongst nonprofits and between nonprofits and funders? Can they also be a platform to enable the sharing of best practices and creating evidence base of what works? Akshat mentioned that one of the biggest value adds he's had is being a part of the Unlimited investee alum group or whatever. And so I'd like your thoughts on sort of looking into the future and what a role that intermediaries could really play more effectively and more significantly than they're doing today. And this is for all of you in any order.
So definitely, like I said in the beginning, resources for development work will increase, especially with CSR coming in, and the ability of those who are holding the funds to reach out to where the money should go is not there. So intermediaries play and will continue to play a very significant role. I think that's, and similarly, it's not just about the resources reaching people, but also the other kind of inputs which are required, the HR advice and the monitoring and the strategy advice, etc. So those are roles which we're moving towards more and more professionalization. So those are roles that somebody will have to play in a much more robust way than what a funding organization can do. So I think that's definitely, there's definitely a role for intermediaries. And I think this, the importance of the intermediary having what could be called field intelligence, really understanding the field, the importance of them being experts in their areas and of not doing what they do not know how to do. I mean, just asking the same scale up intermediary service, if we also ask them to do leadership support, they will not be able to do it. And just to like lump different things into intermediaries would not be right. So I think the future would be in more and more specialized expert services of intermediaries. And this whole thing about, I'll underscore the field intelligence, because without understanding the limitations and the aspirations of those who are implementing, or the aspirations and the needs of the funder, the intermediary services will not succeed. I think I'm quite convinced about that. You may know what, for instance, what scale up means, but if you don't know what scale up for an NGO means, then it really doesn't help anybody.
I would say, as far as future is concerned, definitely there's this need of having all kinds of intermediaries in place, generalized, specialized, all of them, because they kind of act like players in this ecosystem, which is very important. Especially because when I see a lot of young people getting into the sector, it helps to have them out there. Intermediaries really create this support system for young people to get that start initially, because that head start is very, very important. I mean, as simple as someone who's starting up to have a tag of an unlimited or an echoing green or Atma, it helps to go back home and talk to your parents and say, look, I have something, someone has acknowledged my efforts. Because you constantly deal with this this gap and this stuff to convince your parents out there. So these are very small things which give you a lot of support. And I feel when we go from here on, now that we have had this 1 decade or 1.5 decade of intermediaries cropping up of different kinds, it's important that we relook and revisit the models that they're using, because I sense this a lot of Western models being used to work with NGOs and donors. And I wonder if there is a possibility of merging both Western and Eastern models of working, because otherwise we're becoming too, we're trying to get NGOs to quantify their impact and just sticking to those kind of metrics. But is there something that we are not seeing, is what I would encourage intermediaries to look at.
So I have a few things to say about this one. So I think the main question was on collaboration. So one of the things that I think an intermediary can do, and what you can count on an intermediary to do, is know the space and to know the landscape maybe a bit better than you can, because their main job is to go out there and talk to different organizations who are doing different things. So for instance, Soumya and I were talking about what are they going to do with their students after they graduate, and I could name off like 5 organizations like that who are doing really good work with alumni programs. And I feel like that's a big part of my job, is just to say, these are some resources. You need to figure out what works for you, but these are some people you should talk to. I also think in the field of collaboration, one of the things that Atma has taken the step to do this year, and Divya is at the back from Maharashtra Dyslexia Association and is part of this, we have in Mumbai really focused in on the issue of education for students with intellectual disabilities. And we have 10 organizations in our portfolio right now who are focused on that. It's a really underserved area. It's an area where there's not a lot of collaboration, but there's a lot of sustainability in the models, and we saw a lot of opportunity in that. So our expertise is in capacity building for education nonprofits. That's where we focus. What we've done is we've brought together all of the experts in the field and these 10 organizations to discuss what are best practices. What does it look like to bring in great resources to your students? What are the common challenges that you face? And our only job is just to convene that space, manage the logistics, give everyone lunch, and make sure that they can talk to each other and work together and start pushing ahead on specific issues. So we're working on changing some definitions with the disability certificate, or how easy or difficult it is to get that for parents. So that's another way that we're fueling collaboration, and I think even some other organizations like Unlimited has taken a skills focus now, or Dasra, as I'm sure everyone knows, has been focused on adolescent girls. So that kind of convening that intermediaries can do is really great. And one last plug for best practices. So one of the things that Atma has made available is we work on the same projects time and time again with our organizations, and we have sort of codified that process and put that all on an online platform. So our services are only available for organizations in Mumbai and Pune, and for specific organizations that meet all of our many criteria. And that might not be everybody, and that's fine. But we do know that everyone needs different types of support. So the online platform is called atmanetwork.in. You can go there, sign up. Everything is free, and it has 90 different projects across 10 different organizational development areas, everything from governance to marketing and programs and services and monitoring evaluation. And it has step-by-step guides, it has examples that we have created with other organizations, and it has like readings and templates and tools that you can use and download. So that's a way that we are trying to codify best practices and make that available to everybody. And if you guys have great examples of work that you've done in that space, we would love for you to upload that as well to the network. No, so that it is, Atma as an organization is specific to education NGOs, so all of the examples you'll see are with those organizations, but an HR policy is an HR policy, so. atmanetwork.in.
So thank you very much for that. I know we're the last session of the day, so we tried to make it briefer than the earlier ones, and we'd like to leave it open now for Q&A. Anybody can start and just ask some questions to our panelists or to me or whatever you'd like. Please go ahead.
I think, as usual, I'm the first. Yeah. You know, in our emails, we get bombarded with so many, organizations that are offering something or the other. So is there any broad criteria by which we can check out who's genuine, who's not? And, somebody might be new and we know nothing about them. We can't, chuck them out just because they are not new. Any broad criteria, if anything?
I think it's just check with somebody who's used the services before. I don't suppose,
logical.
yeah. And also I think it would help to just find out who are the people involved and try to see where they've been before, what have they done before. So a little bit of, I don't think
Nothing
there's any set criteria.
I wanted to ask a question to Akshat, actually. I was interested when you talked about the future of role of what you could see intermediary services playing. You talked about that I think we rely too much on Western models. What exactly would you do? How would you change that? Or is there something that you would add that would have a more indigenized or a localized flavor? If you can give us an actual example. Or an example that you feel has worked well, where you've seen, sort of a good blend of East and West happening?
I don't know if there's a model that exists like this, but what I can sense is that the way the sector functions, and the more we are engaging in it, we're realizing that a lot of us function from the Western model's perspective. Across our operations, the way we want to monitor our impact, the language, the jargon, the language that we have created, I feel there is some scope of looking inward, what is happening here. Maybe actually, I would say the closer would be, there's this ecosystem of Manav Sadhana in Ahmedabad. They work on Gandhian principles, and they have really been able to incubate a lot of organizations using Gandhian ways of working, values. So I feel that is an interesting, in fact, while talking, I just realized there is something like that exists. So I feel, we, at times what happens is intermediaries tend to follow, take that track of, because funding, also the kind of norms that have been established are through what is happening globally. So we tend to look for, subscribe to that instead of looking to what's happening locally. And that would help to just go inward and see what's there.
Well, are there any questions that you all have? I thought you may have on the payment model and the whole thing of payment and, whether one pays and it's really a value add, or if you all had any experiences on paying for, yeah, please.
Chip was one of the early ones to come into Atma's fold. We were their guinea pigs, actually. And it's true. And we were one of the guinea pigs that Atma had right at the outset. And it was invaluable, the exercise, because we didn't know what we were looking for exactly, and there were these multiple holes. As the 4 organizations that went through compliance, I think we started at sub-zero, because we really had no clue what we needed. And our very first bit of advice was get yourself somebody who's full-time the executive, you know. We can't have trustees who give a little bit of time and a little bit, we're a small organization even now. But it was thanks to Atma that we realized this, and it was an awful lot of money to be spending to get this individual. And well, I think we were convinced, and we haven't looked back. So I think the role of intermediary services is invaluable in that sense.
Just say something about payment. I think some intermediary services actually benefit the organization for a lifetime. I mean, what CAP would do for an organization in terms of ensuring its compliance, or what somebody would do for succession planning, I mean, that's the cost that you pay. It's really an investment, and it's not just one time-bound exercise. It's really for a lifetime of institutional strengthening. I think the problem with the cost is when it's completely kind of disproportionate. When you're paying upwards of 20,000 rupees a day to an intermediary service provider, when your field worker earns 20,000 rupees a month, I think that kind of does not work in terms of costs.
Okay, so then we'll close this session. Thank you very much for being an engaged audience. I really hope you've enjoyed the rest of the day and our session. Thank you.